Imagine boarding a plane filled with excitement for the upcoming trip. But before you can even fasten your seatbelt, you're asked to give up your seat. Not because you did anything wrong, but because someone decided you don't belong there. This is the story of two black siblings, a powerful white woman and a flight crew willing to please the wrong person until one phone call changed everything. Ariana Brooks, a quick-witted 19-year-old with a passion for travel. Vlogging was adjusting her camera lens near the large window at Roosevelt International Airport. The August sunlight gilded the runway, casting reflections off the hundreds of planes taken off and landing a glowing reminder of the endless possibilities each flight could hold. Beside her was her 17-year-old brother, Micah Brooks, clutching his carry-on backpack, the nervousness clearly showing in his eyes. Despite his age, Micah always carried himself with a maturity beyond his years. A gifted young pianist, the flight to Silvergate meant the world to him. It was his chance to audition for a prestigious music academy. Their father, Nathaniel Brooks, had once mentioned having some connections in the aviation industry, but he had never revealed the extent of his influence. Nathaniel was a reserved man, never one to boast about the privileges life had afforded him. As a result, Ariana and Micah were used to flying economy, jostling through security lines like everyone else. Occasionally, they noticed that some airport staff seemed to recognize them, but with a last name like Brooks fairly common, they never gave it much thought. What the siblings didn't know was that behind that modest facade, their father was actually the largest shareholder of Arias Air, one of the nation's leading commercial airlines. That morning, both arrived at the airport brimming with excitement. Ariana was eager to document the entire journey, dreaming of launching her own vlog channel. Micah couldn't stop imagining himself with his forehead pressed to the airplane window, watching clouds drift by as he mentally rehearsed his audition piece. In their minds, this was bound to be an unforgettable trip, though they had no idea what lay ahead. After clearing security, they made their way to Gate C-33, the boarding point for their flight to Silvergate. The waiting area was packed. Parents called for their kids, business people tapped away on laptops, tourists flipped through travel guides. Ariana took in the scene, noticing a few curious glances from strangers. She wasn't unfamiliar with those looks. Some friendly, others harder to read, but she simply shrugged them off. She was ready to enjoy this flight from the East Coast to the West, with summer promising new opportunities. Sis Micah said softly, nudging her shoulder, "Do you think Dad will pick us up in Silvergate?" "He's being kind of vague." Ariana chuckled, nudging him back. "He's always like that. But I bet he'll be there. He's always busy, but he never misses our big moments." The airport speaker interrupted their conversation. "Passengers on Arias Air Flight 722 to Silvergate International Airport. We are now boarding guests requiring special assistance and those traveling with small children. Please line up at the gate." Ariana and Micah exchanged a smile and stepped forward. Micah adjusted the strap of his backpack, silently reviewing the notes of his audition piece. Ariana murmured the opening line of her vlog intro. Ariana's travel diary officially begins. She whispered, adjusting the camera. She was determined to capture every moment from takeoff to touchdown in Silvergate. When their boarding group was called, they scanned their tickets and stepped into the jet bridge. The warm hum of the engine filled their ears, adrenaline surging in their veins. Entering the cabin, they took in the familiar scent of leather seats, coffee, and recycled air. A tired-looking flight attendant nodded at them and pointed toward the forward section of the cabin. Ariana and Micah had been upgraded to premium economy, a small gift from their father, which they assumed came from his frequent flyer, Miles, never imagining anything more behind it. They settled into seats 8A and 8B. Ariana tucked her camera bag under her feet, making sure it stayed secure. Micah pulled out a small notebook filled with handwritten music. Just need to tweak a few sections. He mumbled eyes, scanning the page. Ariana nodded, smiling. "You're going to do great." She glanced around the cabin. Large windows, extra legroom seats spaced more generously than on any flight they'd taken before. But what they didn't know was that the real turbulence wouldn't come from the skies ahead. It was waiting for them right there in that very cabin. It wasn't dark clouds. It wasn't an announcement from the captain. What threw this flight into chaos came instead from a passenger with an inflated ego, and a flight crew who had no idea they were about to make the most serious mistake of their careers. Just minutes after Ariana and Micah had settled into their seats, the cabin began to fill up. Passengers filed in, one after another, squeezing through the narrow aisle, dragging suitcases and scanning for overhead storage space. The air buzzed with chatter as some swapped seats to sit near loved ones while others struggled to cram oversized bags into overhead bins. The flight attendants bustled back and forth, checking seat numbers and making sure everything was in order. Then Ariana heard a sharp, high-pitched voice coming from the front of the plane, assertive and condescending at once. "Excuse me, can you move? Don't you see? I have priority boarding." The speaker was a middle-aged woman with neatly styled blonde hair. She wore a cream-colored blazer, tailored trousers, and gleaming high heels, an outfit ill-suited for the cramped aisle of a commercial aircraft. But more than the outfit, it was the attitude. The kind of attitude that instantly made Ariana think of what social media called a Karen. To her, this woman was the definition of a Linda Whitmore. Linda entered with haughty confidence in every step and glance. One hand held a large handbag, the other a designer purse, as if it were proof of the status she believed she deserved. A flight attendant stepped forward to greet her, but Linda brushed past with a dismissive nod, barely acknowledging the person Ariana quietly observed as the woman stopped near row 8, the exact row she and her brother were seated in. Linda glanced around as if evaluating tables at a luxury restaurant, not the premium economy section of a commercial flight. The way her eyes swept over Ariana and Micah gave Ariana chills. It wasn't just curiosity, it was judgment. Micah, still focused on his music notebook, looked up and whispered, "Do you know her?" Ariana shook her head, but unease was already creeping in. Something about this woman felt off, and Ariana sensed this wasn't the end of it. "This is not the seat I selected." Linda's voice rang out sharply, loud enough for nearby passengers to turn and look. "I specifically asked for a seat, with more leg room. I can't sit anywhere else. I fly with Orias Air all the time. I'm a Diamond Tier member. Or have you forgotten?" The flight attendant tried to remain calm, replying with a polite smile. "Ma'am, I understand." But Linda snapped her fingers coldly. "I don't need an explanation. I need my correct seat. And hurry. I don't have all day." Micah and Ariana exchanged tense glances. The attendant checked Linda's boarding pass again, then gently said, "Your seat is 12A, still in premium economy, and very comfortable. I'm sorry, but row 8 is already occupied." Linda's eyes locked onto the siblings, as if they were trespassing on something that belonged to her, as if their presence there was a personal offense. Ariana turned her face away, trying to avoid conflict before takeoff, but she could feel the woman's stare burning into the back of her neck. "I see who's sitting there," Linda muttered loud enough for them to hear clearly. The words pierced Ariana like a blade. She and Micah, two young black travelers, dressed, simply were now being looked at as people who shouldn't be in the best row of this cabin. "Do something about this," Linda said, pointing at the flight attendant, then jabbing her finger accusingly toward the siblings. "I was promised row 8 left side near the front. This is completely unacceptable." Ariana's stomach twisted. She didn't want to assume the worst of people, but the way Linda targeted them clearly went beyond a seat dispute. Micah looked at her worried. She gently squeezed his hand in reassurance, though she herself was far from calm. The initial flight attendant appeared flustered, unsure of how to handle the situation. Thankfully, another crew member, seemingly in her late 20s with a softer voice, stepped in to help. She tried explaining to Linda that the flight was full and that the passengers in row 8 had fully valid tickets. Linda's response: a scornful huff. "We'll revisit this," she muttered, then turned and marched to the front where the cockpit and senior crew members were stationed. Micah exhaled. Maybe that's over. Ariana wasn't so sure. She could still see Linda whispering to another flight attendant near the cockpit. Their eyes flicked over to her and Micah, the kind of look that carried meaning. A new wave of anxiety crept in. "I don't think we're out of the woods," Ariana whispered, still staring into her camera lens. She began filming the smaller details, the overhead signs, the safety card in the seat pocket, trying to focus on the vlog instead of the growing dread. But in her heart, she knew one thing for sure. Linda Whitmore wasn't finished with them yet. While Ariana's small camera continued silently recording from her seat, Linda. Whitmore's sharp, cutting voice echoed like a warning horn. The familiar lines of people who believe themselves entitled rang throughout the cabin. "Do you know who I am? I spend thousands of dollars a month flying this airline." Each time she spoke, the air in the cabin seemed to tighten heavy with tension. Ariana and Micah had no idea that these words were laying the groundwork for an impending confrontation, one that would not only test them but also place the integrity and professionalism of the entire flight crew under a glaring spotlight. And above all, it would be the moment when a father, quietly working behind the scenes, would step into the light to protect his children at all costs. The final boarding announcements sounded over the cabin speakers. Reminders to fasten seatbelts, passengers cramming carry-ons into the overhead bins. The atmosphere thickened like a storm about to break. The cold air from the ventilation system swirled around everyone, but it couldn't cool the rising sense of unease. At the front, near the galley, Linda Whitmore was pointing and speaking loudly to a tall male flight attendant in a crisp uniform, his gold name tag gleaming. Colin Masters led attendant for the flight. Though his face remained professionally composed, Ariana could clearly see the uncertainty in his gestures as Linda continued to complain, demand, and criticize without pause. Meanwhile, Micah softly hummed the notes of his music, trying to calm himself. He was usually excellent at maintaining composure before big performances. But this time, what unsettled him wasn't stage pressure. It was the injustice hanging over them like a dark cloud. Suddenly, the sharp clack of high heels echoed down the aisle like a drumbeat of trouble. Linda Whitmore turned and walked straight toward row 8. Cold gaze commanding stride, she stopped and pointed directly at the siblings. "I've spoken with the lead flight attendant. They admitted my seat was incorrectly assigned, and I want these 2 seats." Micah flinched eyes wide in disbelief. Ariana, trying to contain her emotions, responded in a calm voice. "Ma'am, these are the seats we were assigned from the beginning. If there's been a mistake on the airline's part, perhaps you could speak to the gate agent or ground staff." Linda sneered, crossing her arms like someone indulging a child's foolish argument. "I already did, and they said this flight is full. You two should volunteer to switch seats. It'll be easier for everyone." Micah, still trembling slightly, couldn't hold back any more. "Why should we move? We're not taking anyone else's place. These are our tickets. We have the right to sit here," Linda scoffed, "so you two think you deserve these seats. Premium economy isn't for just anyone. I'm a platinum-tier customer. This airline knows who I am." At that moment, Colin Masters, the lead attendant, stepped in. He offered a strained smile. "Miss Whitmore, perhaps we can find a more agreeable solution for everyone." Linda waved a dismissive hand. "That's easy. Just move them to the back row. They're problem solved." Ariana felt the blood rush to her face. She remembered her father's advice. Stay calm. Don't back down. And if possible, record the truth. She discreetly switched the camera back on, resting it on her lap and angling it upward. She didn't want to escalate the situation, but she knew she needed evidence in case things spiraled out of control. Colin scratched the back of his neck. "I'm afraid the flight is full, and these two passengers have valid tickets for row 8. He tried to offer alternatives. We could issue you a compensation voucher or arrange for a flight tomorrow with an even better seat. Perhaps an upgrade if available." Linda cut him off, her voice sharp as a blade. "I'm not waiting until tomorrow. I need to fly today, and I'm not sitting behind row 8. If you don't resolve this, I'll have to escalate it." The threat hung in the air. Linda turned on her heel and marched straight toward the cockpit. Colin hesitated, then followed after her, clearly unsettled. Ariana felt her heart pounding in her chest. What did she mean by escalate? Micah whispered. She shook her head, trying not to show fear. "We have our tickets. We haven't done anything wrong." Nearby passengers had started to take notice. Some looked annoyed by the disturbance. An older man seated behind them leaned forward and quietly said, "Don't worry. People like that always think they're entitled. But she can't force you to move." Ariana nodded, grateful for a rare moment of empathy amidst the chaos. But the worry inside her didn't subside. She knew the real storm hadn't hit yet, and then it did. Another flight attendant approached her, demeanor serious. The name tag on her uniform read Rachel Monroe, flight supervisor. Rachel leaned in and spoke quietly to Ariana. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we have a passenger claiming these seats were booked under her name. We may need you two to relocate." Ariana and Micah froze. Ariana took a deep breath, clutching the strap of her bag. She looked Rachel in the eye, her voice calm but firm. "Our tickets clearly show these seat numbers. We boarded properly. We've violated no airline policies. Why should we be the ones to move?" Ariana raised her phone, the screen lighting up with the electronic boarding pass, clearly showing row 8. Her voice trembled slightly but remained firm. "We have tickets that clearly show these seats. We boarded properly. There's no reason we should be asked to leave Rachel Monroe." The flight supervisor nodded with a sympathetic look, though her eyes remained tense. "I understand. But sometimes there are booking system errors, and we need to take all passengers into account, especially frequent flyers." She leaned forward slightly. "Would you please gather your belongings and move to the rear rows?" Micah gripped the strap of his backpack tightly, his voice soft but resolute. "No. With all due respect, I decline. These are our assigned seats. Why should we move?" Rachel sighed and straightened up. I'm just trying to prevent this from escalating. If you continue not to cooperate, we may have to escalate the issue to the captain. The words hit like a blow. Ariana felt a wave of fear rise in her throat. Her camera was still recording her hands slightly shaking as she held it. She remembered all too well the headline she'd seen: passenger dragged off plane due to booking error, black family forced to vacate seats for priority guest. It was all playing out before her eyes now. This can't actually be happening, she thought. She clenched her hand, took a deep breath, then spoke slowly. We refuse to leave. We paid for these seats. Unless there's an official reason, please respect our rights. Rachel pressed her lips together, her eyes sharp and brief. I'm sorry, I'll need to speak with the captain. She turned and walked away. Micah whispered, This is insane. They can't just kick us off because that lady wants to sit up front. Right? Ariana didn't answer. She simply placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Though fury boiled inside her, she forced herself to appear composed. The flight hadn't even left the runway yet. The two siblings had already been cornered victims of blatant favoritism toward a special passenger. Neither of them knew that things were about to go far beyond a seating dispute and impact both their lives and the careers of the crew involved. The cockpit door swung open. A tall man in pilot's uniform stepped out, commanding presence, composed demeanor. Captain Jonathan Reed, a veteran of over 20 years in the skies. Following closely behind him like a victor entering the arena was Linda Whitmore, walking smugly with a smug smile. Captain Reed approached row 8, giving a polite nod. Good afternoon. I've been informed of a seating dispute. Our priority is to ensure an on-time and safe departure. Linda immediately cut in her tone. Triumphant. I purchased these seats. They're in the wrong ones. Ariana tightened her grip on her camera. She noticed a few other passengers pulling out their phones to record as well. The air grew denser, colder from the air conditioning or from Linda's glare directed straight at them. Captain Reed continued. This passenger, Ms. Whitmore, claims she booked these 2 seats. There may have been a system error. To avoid delaying the flight, we're asking you to move to row 27 completely free of charge. Micah stared at him, stunned, speechless. That's not fair. Our tickets are completely valid. Linda curled her lip, crossing her arms. Life's not always fair, kid. People like me fly in these seats every month, it's standard. Captain Reed raised a hand to quiet everyone. I understand your frustration, but if we don't resolve this soon, the flight will be delayed. If you continue to refuse, we will have no choice but to remove you from the aircraft for not following crew instructions. His words landed in Ariana's chest like a stone. She looked around, searching for support from the other passengers. A few showed sympathy in their expressions, but no one spoke up. No one wanted to become the main character in the next viral controversy. Ariana took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. Captain Reed, we didn't cause this problem. Our tickets are valid. Perhaps the airline can verify the booking system to confirm the accurate information. Linda sighed mockingly. No need to drag this out. I'm a VIP. They're in my seats. Let's not waste any more time. Captain Reed's face briefly faltered. He seemed conflicted, but clearly bound by protocol, or by the soft power of an elite customer, Ms. Brooks. Mr. Brooks, he said, I kindly ask you to cooperate. We need to depart promptly. Otherwise, I'll be forced to have you removed from the flight. Micah was about to jump up and protest, but Ariana gently placed her hand on his. She knew if they didn't back down at the right time, They could be thrown off this flight, miss the audition that could change everything, and have no way to make it to Los Angeles in time. She swallowed her tears. Ariana sat silently in row 27, her fingers gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. In front of her was a folded meal tray, and beside her sat a family of 4 with 2 children squabbling over a packet of cookies. Micah curled up by the window, his face tense, his eyes blank as he stared out at the sky. Ariana's heart ached as she thought about the confused, embarrassed look on her brother's face as they were removed from the front row. What had begun as a dream flight had turned into a nightmare, one where 2 black youths were deliberately targeted just to appease a privileged passenger. As the seatbelt sign turned off, flight attendants began pushing the food cart down the aisle. The scent of pre-brewed coffee and packaged meals mingled in the air. Ariana felt her phone vibrate lightly in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out and saw a message appear. From Nathaniel Brooks. Ariana, I know you're about to fly. I hope you and Micah have a safe trip. If anything happens, anything at all, call me. I'll be in LA soon for a meeting. We'll celebrate Micah's audition together. Love you both. Her fingers froze. Those words felt like a warm whisper in the middle of a cold, hollow place. She bit her lip. Her father had no idea what had happened, but if he did, she knew for sure he would never let it stand. She lifted her gaze, scanning the cabin. Linda Whitmore now lounged comfortably in seat 8A, sipping orange juice as if nothing had happened. Colin Masters, the lead flight attendant, made his way down the aisle, carefully avoiding Ariana's eyes as if carrying a trace of shame. Part of Ariana wanted to stand up and shout that she was the daughter of Nathaniel Brooks, the major shareholder of Everline Air, the very airline Linda had so loudly claimed special privileges from, but she knew that wasn't how her father had raised her to handle things. He always said, "The right silence is the loudest proof when the truth comes to light." Ariana decided to respond. She checked her phone's settings. The in-flight Wi-Fi was on, but not connected. She tried accessing it, but an error popped up. Unable to connect at this time. Please try again later. She clenched her jaw and turned the screen off. Micah glanced over, his eyes filled with unspoken frustration. "Did you message Dad yet?" "Not yet." She replied softly, "Connection's down, but I'll try again later." An hour passed, the cabin had settled and the food cart had rolled by. Ariana tried again. This time, the Wi-Fi connected successfully. Without delay, she opened the messaging app and began to type, "Dad, I don't even know where to begin." On Everline Air Flight 722, Micah and I were forced to give up our assigned valid seats. A passenger named Linda Whitmore, claiming to be a priority customer, demanded seats 8A and 8B, which we were already seated in. Even after I showed our electronic boarding passes, the crew asked us to move to avoid delaying the flight. She took a deep breath and continued. Captain Jonathan Reed threatened to remove us from the flight. If we didn't comply, both the lead attendant, Colin Masters, and flight supervisor Rachel Monroe sided with her. They didn't properly check the system or stand up for us. They just tried to satisfy someone with status. "Dad, we're not just angry, we feel humiliated." Ariana paused for a moment, then hit send. The phone vibrated softly. The message had gone through. Micah leaned over. "He's going to do something right." Ariana looked at her brother and smiled, though her eyes were rimmed with red. If anyone can, it's Dad. The two sat in silence for a few minutes. The sky outside was blanketed with white clouds. In that quiet moment, Ariana felt the wave beginning to rise. Linda. Whitmore might think she had won, but she had no idea she had messed with the wrong person. Not just the daughter of a major shareholder, but a young woman who refused to accept injustice. Ariana rested her hand on the small camera, still quietly recording in her lap. Every frame, every glance, every word from the crew. It was all there on the memory card. Ariana ended the last message with a simple yet powerful sentence. "I don't want to make a big deal, but this is truly wrong. I know you work with them, but what happened is unacceptable. Micah is really upset. Can you help us, Dad?" She hit send, not expecting an immediate reply. The screen remained still. No typing dots, no indication that Nathaniel Brooks was reading. Maybe he was in a meeting or his phone was on silent. The hollow feeling lingered as she sank into her seat, heart still aching with suppressed anger. 15 minutes later, her phone vibrated. From Dad, Nathaniel Brooks. "I'm truly sorry this happened. I'm absolutely furious right now. Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Stay calm. Everything will be okay." A wave of relief washed over Ariana, but it was tinged with anxious curiosity. How exactly is he going to handle it, she wondered. Though she knew her father had ties in the aviation industry, she had never seen him wield his influence directly. But this time was different. He was angry, and when her father was truly determined, nothing could stop him. Just then, from the front of the plane, she noticed something unusual. 3 flight attendants, including Colin Masters, were gathered around the wall phone, their faces tense, their voices lowering into anxious whispers. Ariana assumed it might just be a routine call from the cockpit, but their nervous glances said otherwise. Her father was doing something. Another flight attendant rushed in from first class, heading straight to the cockpit with a tight, concerned expression. In row 8, Linda Whitmore still lounged comfortably, sipping sparkling wine as if nothing had happened. She flipped through a travel magazine, her face calm and arrogant. Ariana couldn't hear clearly, but it looked like Captain Jonathan Reed had exited the cockpit, walked over to the intercom phone, and was now talking to someone, his expression shifting with every word he heard. Then Ariana received another message from Dad, Nathaniel Brooks. "Just relax if you can. I'm speaking with the senior operations team. Everything will be handled soon." She placed a hand on her chest, heart thudding. Sometimes she forgot who her father really was. A humble man, never one to flaunt power, always teaching his children to live kindly and simply. But today, he was a father, fighting for his kids with all the strength he had. Micah leaned across the seat and whispered, "What's happening?" Ariana tilted her phone slightly to show him the message. Micah's eyes lit up with a spark, like a small flame flickering in the dark. Linda Whitmore might think she'd won, but she had no idea the game had only just begun. Hundreds of miles away in a sleek office overlooking the New York City skyline, Nathaniel Brooks ended a call with Everline Air's executive operations team. He stood and walked to the window, the late afternoon sun casting a glow over his graying hair. Waves of emotion passed over his face, fury, disbelief, and regret. Fury that his children had been treated like second-class passengers. Disbelief that the flight crew had bent so easily to a loud, entitled traveler, and regret that his years of humility had made Ariana and Micah invisible to the very people who worked for his company. When Nathaniel acquired a majority stake in Everline Air, nearly a decade ago, he chose to remain silent. No media exposure, no direct involvement. He wanted his children to grow up like any other kids, untouched by wealth or status. But that very normalcy had now turned Ariana and Micah into victims of preferential treatment. The desk phone rang. The screen displayed Lucinda Frost, COO. He pressed speakerphone. "Lucinda, tell me exactly what's going on." Lucinda's voice came through husky with a trace of nervousness. "I just spoke with Captain Jonathan Reed of Flight 722. He confirmed that a passenger named Margaret Caldwell, a Platinum Tier member, requested to switch into row 8. In the process of accommodating her, the two original passengers were asked to relocate to the rear of the plane. The flight was delayed. They were even threatened with removal if they didn't comply." Nathaniel clenched his jaw. "That matches what my daughter just texted." "Is there anything else?" Lucinda sighed. The captain said he felt pressured to de-escalate the situation and avoid further delays. "He sends his apologies, but at the time he had no idea those passengers were your children." Nathaniel stepped toward his desk, fists tightening. "Then let me remind everyone at Everline Air who's actually in charge here." Lucinda Frost, her voice still tense over the phone, said the captain mentioned he didn't actually intend to remove the two children from the plane. He just said that to de-escalate things with Caldwell. Nathaniel Brooks let out a dry laugh. De-escalate her, or appease her. The silence on the other end confirmed everything he suspected. "We have protocols to prevent discriminatory behavior. I'm prepared to call an emergency meeting with the board," Lucinda offered cautiously. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes, the corners of his mouth curling into a cold smile. "We're going to do more than that. Wait until they land in Los Angeles. I want the entire crew suspended until further notice. No one walks away from this, and keep it quiet. I want to handle this my way." "Understood, Mr. Brooks." Lucinda responded swiftly, then ended the call. Nathaniel rubbed his temples. The headache wasn't from fatigue. It came from memory, from the many times he'd faced discrimination as a young man, enduring it all to build an empire from nothing. Money to him had never been a tool to belittle others. It was a shield to protect those he loved, and today he would wield it to defend Ariana and Micah. He picked up his phone and dialed Ariana. Unsurprisingly, the call didn't connect. They were still in the air. He left a voicemail, his tone both firm and gentle. "This is Dad, sweetheart. I know you and Micah have gone through something upsetting. Stay calm. I'll take care of everything once you land. I'm proud of you for staying composed. Love you both so much." His eyes then fell on an old photo frame on the desk. A picture of Ariana and Micah riding bikes in the park, their faces glowing with freedom and joy. The same children were now enduring a humiliation. No one should face all because of their skin color and someone else's blind entitlement, he whispered a promise. When they land, everything changes. High above Ariana, and Micah still sat quietly in row 27. A flight attendant rolled by with the drink cart, but Ariana shook her head. She couldn't stomach the diluted soda right now. Micah sipped a bit of water, his eyes still dazed from the lingering shock. The seatbelt sign turned off after a short bout of turbulence. Ariana leaned over. "Dad texted," she whispered. "He's handling it." Something might happen soon. Micah frowned. What could Dad even do? He's just a financial consultant. Ariana hesitated. She wasn't sure how much to reveal. All their lives they'd known their father was in multiple industries, real estate, tech, philanthropy, but neither had fully grasped the extent of his influence. She answered slowly. "Micah, I don't think Dad is just a regular guy." At the front of the plane, Colin Masters, the lead flight attendant, picked up the wall-mounted phone again. His expression darkened. Moments later, Pamela Green, the flight supervisor, walked directly to row 8. Linda Whitmore, still comfortably nibbling on cookies and flipping through a magazine, flinched when Pamela bent down to whisper something. Her face changed instantly, from smug to irritated, then concerned. She turned to glance down the cabin, her eyes landing directly on Ariana and Micah. A sharp, blaming look like a dagger, Micah whispered. "Why's she staring like that?" Ariana quietly pulled out her phone. A message from Nathaniel Brooks appeared. "I'm speaking with the captain and operations team. Everything is being handled. You'll see a change soon." Before she could react, she saw 3 flight attendants huddled at the front. Captain Jonathan Reed emerged from the cockpit, exchanging tense words with Colin Masters. And then the unthinkable happened. Linda Whitmore stood up. She began complaining loudly, gesturing wildly, her voice rising, though no one could clearly hear the words. Moments later, 2 flight attendants stepped in close beside her. Not aggressive, but firm enough to send a message. They directed her toward the rear of the cabin. Ariana held her breath. She thought they might place her in row 27 with them, but no. They pointed to row 28, a window seat next to a sleeping passenger. Linda Whitmore looked ready to explode, mumbling something no one bothered to listen to. Ariana turned to Micah. "What's happening right now?" At that moment, Captain Reed approached them. He glanced at them, then at the phone still glowing on Ariana's lap. He spoke, his tone polite to the point of awkwardness. "I want to apologize for what happened earlier. We've just received directives from upper operations. It appears there was a serious error in how your seats were handled. You should never have been moved from row 8." Micah's eyes widened. "So, we're going back to our original seats." Colin Masters, the lead flight attendant, stepped in with an awkward expression. "We'd like to invite you both to move up to business class, free of charge, for the remainder of the flight." Ariana and Micah looked at each other in surprise. Ariana took a deep breath, her mind still echoing the memory of the humiliation they had just endured. "Now you're inviting us to business class, after threatening to remove us from the plane," she asked, her voice no longer hiding her anger. Captain Jonathan Reed glanced at Colin, clearly regretting how far things had spiraled out of control. "We understand this looks terrible, but please know this is a directive from the executive team. They want to make things right immediately." From row 28, Linda Whitmore, no longer smug, hissed, "You can't just push me out of my seat and shove me back here. This isn't how you treat loyal customers." Pamela Green offered a tight smile. "Ms. Whitmore, your seat was never valid. We've reassigned according to the system. Your seat remains in premium economy, just as your ticket reflects. You're punishing me," Whitmore shouted, ignoring the bewildered glances from surrounding passengers. Ariana felt her heart race. This was the moment they could stand firm or accept the offer of upgraded seats. A flicker of vindication surged in her. The woman who humiliated them had now been demoted publicly and shamefully. Colin spoke again, this time with urgency. "Ms. Brooks, Mr. Brooks, it would be an honor if you accepted the upgrade to business class." Micah shrugged and quietly asked, "What do you think?" Ariana gave a slight nod. They unbuckled their seat belts and gathered their belongings. As they stepped into the aisle, soft applause rose from a few passengers. A middle-aged man offered a warm smile. The empathy in their eyes gave the siblings strength. As they passed Linda, Ariana paused. She looked the woman straight in the eye and said gently, "Enjoy your new seat." Then, without another word, she walked forward with Micah and the crew. Just hours earlier, they had been humiliated. Now they were seated in wide, reclining seats with hot towels and gourmet meals being served. Micah finally had room to stretch his legs. Ariana kept the camera in her lap, quietly recording everything. She glanced out the window and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." She didn't fully understand what Nathaniel had done, but clearly his influence had been enough to turn the entire crew's behavior around in a matter of minutes. Thousands of miles away at Airline Air's Denver headquarters, an emergency meeting was in session. Phones rang non-stop. Emails poured in. Top executives sat close together in a video conference including CEO Victoria Langston, COO Lucinda Frost, and Nathaniel Brooks, who joined from his Manhattan office. "I've sent an internal memo to all relevant departments." Lucinda reported, eyes fixed on her tablet. "The crew from Airline Flight 722 will be summoned for a hearing immediately after landing. Our PR team is drafting a press statement, but we hope to handle this internally." Someone added. Nathaniel smirked, not in satisfaction, but in frustration at their naivete. He knew one thing for certain. Ariana had been filming, and nearby passengers had too. There was no way to stop this from going public. "What about Linda Whitmore?" he asked, tone steady but firm. CEO Langston frowned. "She's been a platinum-tier customer for years, but during the review we found she's submitted numerous unreasonable complaints, from flight delays to petty issues like not enough pillows. This is the first incident where she forced someone else out of their seat." Lucinda added. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "So, you already knew she was trouble," Lucinda admitted. "Some crews had reported issues, but since she was a loyal customer, we handled it lightly." Nathaniel remained silent for a long moment. His hand tightened around the glass of water on his desk. "Well, now you see the consequences. I want a full investigation. Every minute from boarding to cruise, testimonies from the captain, the crew, from her, and from my children. If I find any signs of discrimination or policy violations, I won't stop at internal disciplinary action." Nathaniel Brooks spoke with a voice like ice. "I'll treat this as a personal war, and I will take down anyone involved," in the virtual meeting room. Victoria Langston and Lucinda Frost exchanged uneasy glances. "We'll follow proper procedures," Victoria replied. "As soon as the flight lands, we'll collect testimony from everyone involved. If your children are willing to share their experience, it would be greatly appreciated." Nathaniel nodded. "They'll be ready. Trust me." The meeting ended in a tense silence. Nathaniel remained standing in his office, furious, yet relieved that Ariana and Micah were safe in the air. But he knew the real storm was only just beginning. Back at Airline Air's Denver headquarters, executives began debating how to handle the media. One even suggested offering silence vouchers to Ariana and Micah, a suggestion Lucinda immediately rejected. "We can't bribe away the truth with flight credits." Especially now that passenger videos are beginning to circulate, a staff member entered the room and whispered something in Lucinda's ear. Her brow furrowed. A passenger on Flight 722 had just posted a tweet. "Just saw 2 black siblings get booted from their seats for a loud lady on Airline 722. Now they're being moved to business class." What is going on? The tweet was starting to gain traction. When Flight 722 landed at Los Angeles International Ariana and Micah felt their hearts racing. The touchdown was smooth, but they knew the real battle was waiting on the ground. As priority passengers, they were among the first to disembark. The moment they stepped into the jet bridge, they spotted two people in suits waiting for them. One man, one woman, both wearing Airline Air badges, Ms. Brooks. "Mr. Brooks," the man asked, his voice respectful as if addressing royalty. Ariana and Micah looked at each other in disbelief. "Yes, that's us," Ariana replied. The woman gave a gentle nod and said reassuringly, "We've been authorized by Mr. Brooks to escort you to a private conference room. There's a short debriefing with company representatives. We understand this journey has been stressful for you both." Micah, still in shock, simply nodded. Ariana took a deep breath. "All right, we'll go." They were led through a special corridor bypassing the baggage claim crowd. Linda Whitmore was nowhere to be seen. Ariana felt a small wave of relief. She didn't want to lay eyes on that woman again. Micah looked to his sister, letting her lead. Ariana squeezed his hand tightly and walked into the meeting room with her shoulders square. What just happened wasn't a simple booking error. She began. "We were threatened with removal from the flight unless we gave up our seats. The whole cabin witnessed it, and we can't ignore the racial undertones in Mrs. Whitmore's behavior." She paused, voice steady. "You may not have realized it at the time, but it felt like we were being punished for sitting in good seats while being black, and she was rewarded for being loud and entitled." The crew responded in favor of the aggressor, not the victims. Captain Jonathan Reed bowed his head. "I am truly sorry." On screen, Lucinda Frost spoke firmly. "We are conducting a full investigation. Ms. Whitmore will also be required to give her statement. Based on the findings, we will take appropriate disciplinary action to ensure this never happens again." Ariana lifted her chin. "I don't want innocent people to lose their jobs, but I do want to see accountability. What she did was wrong, and how the crew responded, that was wrong too." Nathaniel Brooks, silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was low but resolute. "This airline prides itself on fairness and inclusivity. That must be reflected in its actions, not just in its marketing slogans. Today, Everline failed my children, and the responsibility lies with all of us, from me as the owner to the flight crew." Nathaniel Brooks spoke with unwavering conviction. Micah's eyes widened in shock. He whispered to his sister, "You knew. Dad actually owns Airline Air." Ariana simply shook her head, still unable to process the revelation. Rachel Mills, the senior supervisor in the room, cleared her throat and said, "For now, what you need to know is that your father has instructed us to make this right. The process has begun. The question is, how would you like to proceed? Legal complaint, media involvement, or resolve this directly with the airline?" Micah spoke up, his voice cracking slightly with emotion. "I just want to make it to my audition tomorrow morning. I've practiced for months, and this almost ruined everything." Nathaniel nodded with empathy. "We'll get you there in the best way possible. And Ariana, I support whatever you decide to do about this. But know this, I'll make sure changes happen at the highest level." Ariana saw genuine remorse in the eyes of Captain Reed and Robert Evans. She spoke clearly. "I want a formal apology from Ms. Whitmore, and the airline needs to commit to retraining staff on how to handle seat disputes, fairly, especially when discrimination is involved." Lucinda Grant responded without hesitation. "You have our word, whatever it takes." The heavy tension in the room finally began to ease. Ariana and Micah were no longer just victims. They had become voices for justice, backed silently but powerfully by the father. they had always thought was just a quiet businessman. After the meeting, the two siblings were escorted out of the airport in a sleek black SUV, with a private driver already waiting outside. Inside the vehicle, Nathaniel Brooks's voice came through the intercom. "I'm proud of you both. Rest tonight. Focus on Micah's audition. Let me handle the rest." Ariana turned to her brother, ready to leave all this behind. Micah exhaled and smiled softly. At least for one day. The audition is what matters now. The vehicle pulled up to the Evermore Hotel, a dazzling 5-star residence. All expenses were covered by Airline Air, a gesture of goodwill. As they stepped into the grand lobby, Ariana's phone lit up with a flood of notifications. Social media was exploding with the story of the Karen on Flight 722. Multiple videos captured by fellow passengers were going viral. Ariana briefly considered uploading her own footage from the handheld camera, but she decided to wait, at least until she could speak with her father face to face. Micah needs peace for his audition. Everything else can come later, she reminded herself. Online, Linda Whitmore was now the subject of intense backlash. Videos showing her entitlement aggression and racially charged behavior were being shared at lightning speed. The hashtags Everline 722 and Flying, while Black had climbed to the top of the trending list. Airline Air quickly released an official statement acknowledging a mistake in seat handling and promising a thorough internal investigation, but many already saw the truth. Real change only began after a powerful call from a mysterious father, the airline's true owner, that fueled even more public anger. If they hadn't been his children, would Ariana and Micah have received justice at all? That night, as Ariana and Micah sat by the hotel window, gazing out at the glowing lights of Los Angeles, they knew their lives had changed. Not just because of a seat, but because they dared to stand up to protect their dignity and to demand justice. Beneath their ordinary appearance, they were powerful, not because of wealth, but because of truth, solidarity, and a father who would fight for his children no matter what. Tomorrow, Micah would stand before the judges and play the piece he once thought he'd never get to perform. And Ariana would adjust her camera, ready to tell a story that wasn't just theirs, but one shared by millions who had once been dismissed, overlooked, or pushed to the back. Sometimes, the smallest moments, like a seat on a plane, become a test for an entire system. And in the story of Ariana and Micah Brooks, we don't just witness a dispute over seating. We witness a journey to reclaim dignity, justice, and truth. Maybe you've been there feeling overlooked, judged by your appearance, your skin color, or your social standing, and you know how quietly painful that can be. But it's in those seemingly unfair moments that we often discover the true strength of courage, family, and the power of speaking up with a camera in her hand. Ariana didn't just record footage, she captured her own living history. And Micah, heart pounding with frustration and fear, still held on to his dream of performing the piece he had practiced for months. The two siblings didn't scream, didn't retaliate. They chose a higher path to face it, to prove themselves, and to rise above it. Behind them stood a father who, though quiet, emerged as an unwavering pillar, not to flaunt his power, but to use it exactly when it mattered, to protect, to correct, and to make a system look itself in the mirror. This story is more than a wake-up call to those who judge others through the lens of bias. It is a powerful, quiet manifesto about fairness, human dignity, and the right to be heard. If you've ever wondered whether one person can make a difference, remember Ariana, Micah, and the quiet passengers who filmed the truth and stood for justice in their own small way. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar? Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you believe this story deserves to be heard, don't forget to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more stories that uplift and inspire. Because sometimes one story, just one, can change how we see the world. And maybe you will be the one to write the next chapter. Thank you for watching to the end. See you in the next video.